I remember the exactly calibrated sound of my wife's voice when she said it in court, a precise note of contempt balanced on the edge of grief, like a glass edge dragged slowly across tile. It wasn't a scream, not even a tremor, just a clean, honed accusation. The judge did not look up. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered in that indifferent way they have, like bad halos over people who are already halfway ghosts. $800,000 slid across the invisible table to Mara while I stood there with my jaw stuck halfway open, like I had misheard the math of our life, like maybe she meant $8, maybe she meant nothing at all. But no, the number stayed the same. That kind of number has gravity. After, people forgot to make eye contact in the hallway. You can feel when people are trying not to see you. It's like you're made of a color outside the visible spectrum. The courthouse smelled like paper and old winter coats that had soaked up a decade of commutes. I signed what I had to sign. My hand shook the way it used to when I was a kid, trying to solder a circuit and not burn my fingers, and the shape of my name bled outward, looked like someone else had forged it. I tried to be decent about it. The thing about grief is that it is not a tidal wave. Not for me. No cinematic crash, no one big gulp of salt water dragging me under. It is a slow brine that gets into your clothes, your lungs, your habits, and makes everything feel damp and slightly spoiled. "Do not call me," Mara said. She held a leather portfolio like a shield she had stitched from the hide of our life. "I cannot do this with you." "You know that is not what happened," I said. But the words felt like I had borrowed them from some other father, someone braver or dumber. She did not even flinch. "You left the life out of him one corner at a time, you and your tools and your rules and your petty pride. There are words you do not say in courthouses. There are truths too sharp to set loose in rooms where they echo forever in transcripts and clerks' memories. So I swallowed what I wanted to say and let it burn all the way down. I am an HVAC tech. I make things not too hot and not too cold. I know how to fix sealed systems and how to read the way a fan belt is going to fail before it snaps. That is what I am good at. That and noticing when people lie, which is what Mara was doing, with that flat calm that looks like truth until you tilt it into the light and see the seam. 5 days after the hearing, I took a duffel bag and moved into Evan's old place above the closed taffy shop by South Pier. The landlord, Walt Mendez, gave me the key with both hands, like it was something fragile. "You take your time, Nate. We loved that kid." His voice was full of the kind of kindness that hurts worse than cruelty because it doesn't know what to do with your pain. Dot, his wife, cried behind him and tried to hide it by blaming seasonal allergies. They are the kind of people who put wreaths on their door for every holiday and know who parked illegally on Wednesday by smell alone. Evan's apartment was one bedroom and a stubborn window fan that rattled like it was trying to shake itself into a better life. The walls held a thin line of salt like a high tide mark from years of ocean air curling itself through the plaster. The carpet was the color of small city sidewalks after rain, that resigned brownish gray. He had a futon. He never clicked back into a sofa, just left it half limp like it was always waiting for someone to come home and finish something. A milk crate bookshelf sat in the corner filled with paperbacks that made him look cooler than he had ever tried to be. A corkboard hung above it with 4 pushpins and no notes, intent without execution. 3 coffee mugs, each with a different slogan. World's okayest brother, world's okayest drummer, world's okayest adult. I walked around like the floor might give out, like the place still held the weight of him and didn't want me stepping where I didn't belong. I opened the window and the pier smell rolled in. Old grease and brine, boat diesel, gull feathers, and rust that had been painted over and then rusted again under the paint. That night, I could not sleep. The quiet sat on my chest and counted my breaths like a debt collector. At 2 a.m., I got up and did what I do when things feel like they're swinging out a plum. I made a list. Fix the window fan. When the floorboard by the bed groaned because I shifted wrong, I heard a hollow sound that did not match the rest. The ear picks up certain lies. I put my cheek to the carpet and pushed my phone flashlight in. There was a latch, 2 screws. Whoever hid it was not a carpenter. The carpet edge was frayed from where Evan had pulled it back and tried to make it look like nothing. Inside the crawl space was a lockbox. Metal, scuffed, no key. Then I got the screwdriver. The lock gave up fast and dirty, like it had been waiting to confess. Inside was a stack of cash that made me sit down hard. Not life-changing rich, but life-changing fast. Under the bills were several flash drives in Ziploc bags and a folded note like the kind you passed in 8th grade when you liked someone and couldn't say it. Dad, if you're reading this, I am gone. Use this to find out what really happened to me. I ran my thumb across his handwriting. He always made his D look like he hadn't decided if it was a D or a door. When I plugged the first drive into my laptop, the folder opened like a mouth. There was a video file stamped the week before he died, labeled Storm Deck 1. I clicked it. The basement of my stomach fell through. Nighttime video from a cheap camera. Rain pebbled the lens. A service deck glistened like a stage waiting for the wrong show. Off camera, 2 people argued. Not words, just heat. A metal latch hit metal, sharp, final. One figure moved into frame long enough to catch a reflection in a rain-glossed panel, a vest with a PierNorth logo, and the walk. That swagger I had watched for months cross our marriage like he owned the ground beneath it. Ty Ralston, the man who had turned my wife into a stranger. The man who smiled with his teeth first and his eyes never. There's a part of you that wants to call the police, hand everything over, believe in systems. The other part wants to understand so completely that the cops become a formality, paperwork after the truth is already carved in stone. I did not call anyone. At 2 a.m., the apartment door rattled. The knob turned and stopped. I froze. The laptop light painted my face like a target. The shadow under the door didn't move fast. It slid away slow, like whatever was out there didn't need to hurry. Like it had all night, like it had all the time in the world to come back. I did not sleep after that. The cash, the drives, the note. They sat on the table like unwelcome guests at a terrible breakfast, waiting for me to decide whether I was going to feed them, burn them, or let them devour me first. So I made another list. Track Ty Ralston. Find who else was on that deck. Figure out how my son got that money. Decide if I am the kind of man who can do what comes next. Morning crawled in like it was ashamed of itself. The pier fog pressed against the windows, made the world look like it had been erased and then reconsidered. I brewed coffee in one of Evan's world's okayest mugs and tried to drink past the lump in my throat. The second flash drive waited beside the laptop like a dare. I clicked it open. Folder names, logbook, payroll edits, doc cams, Ralston calls, Mara audio. I stared at the last one until the edges of my vision fuzzed. My son hadn't just suspected something. He had been building a case, step by quiet step. He had done what I never did. He had looked straight at the rot instead of pretending the foundation was fine. I listened to the first audio file, Mara's voice, soft, almost underwater, like she was speaking from a place she hadn't meant to be overheard. I couldn't make out the words, just tones, a question, a pause. Ty's voice answering, low and sure, the way men talk when they believe nothing can touch them. I shut the file before it finished. There are some wounds you have to choose your timing for. The next step on the list was Ty. He worked maintenance now, or pretended to, down on the newer section of the pier where the tourists didn't notice the rust. I could go down there. I could ask questions I already knew the answers to. But people who swagger don't confess. They corner, they deflect, they escalate. So I didn't go. Not yet. Instead, I went through Evan's phone records on the drive. Numbers I didn't recognize. Repeated late-night calls to a contact saved as K. No last name. Just a letter like a door cracked open. K might be friend, enemy, witness, might be the reason my son died, might be the only person who tried to help. Before I talked to cops, before I talked to Mara, before I went after Ty, I needed to know who K was, which meant one more list. Find K. Don't die doing it. Bring light into the places where the deckboards creak. Finish what Evan started. The thing about grief is, you think it's a weight, but sometimes it's a wire, and once it's wrapped around you, it pulls you forward toward something sharp. I wasn't sure yet if it was justice or ruin, but I was moving, and whoever rattled that doorknob at 2 a.m. was going to learn I wasn't done being a father just because the world had declared me a failure of one. While you're here, hit the hype button. Don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? You get truth from systems the same way you get cold air from a unit that has been coughing for weeks. You do not pound it. You find the right panel and the right screws, and you keep your hands steady. You listen to the rattle, not with your ears, but with the small bone that lives at the base of your neck, the one that hums when a bearing is about to seize. The next morning, I took a shower so hot, it felt like I was washing with a mistake. Then I shaved, scraped the blade slow over the ridge of an old scar, and put on my work boots, the ones with the soles worn into the posture of a man who leans forward even when he is standing still. I walked to City Hall Annex. The clerk at the records window wore an expression like paperwork, offended her personally. Her name tag said Lydia in black stamped letters, no frills, no title, just a name to blame when the copier jammed. Behind her, a shelf of binders leaned at an angle that would make a fire marshal cry. The air smelled faintly of toner and the defeated hope of citizens. A clock on the wall ticked with the sluggish confidence of a government that knows time is on its side. I want to file a public records request, I said. You and half the county, she said, not looking up, stamping something with the rhythmic boredom of a person who has seen every flavor of desperation and cataloged them by staple pattern. It is for permits and inspection sign-offs for the South Pier service decks, also badge swipe logs in aggregate for the week of June 9th to June 15th. I am not asking for names on the swipe logs, just hours and anonymized badge counts by zone and day. She looked at me in that way people look when they realize you are not the usual. The pause was small, but it had corners. You know the forms. I know how to read a wall that is a lattice of forms. She nodded once, like respect was a rationed commodity, and slid a clipboard toward me. I filled out Form 61B and a companion sheet, the one where you sign away the illusion that public records are actually public. I kept it narrow. Narrow is believable. Broad is panic. I asked for variance requests for the storm night. I asked for maintenance tickets and closure codes for the guardrails on Deck 3B. Any chance I can inspect the permit books while I wait, I said, and smiled like I did not have a hole where my heart used to be. Inspection is in the reading room, she said. No phones, pencils only. We copy at $1.50 a page. You break a spine, you buy the book. I took a pencil. I turned pages. Permits tell a story if you know what the verbs mean. They never say, we cut corners because the holiday crowd was bigger than projected. They say, temporary structural accommodation approved under expedited review. They never say, we gambled with load limits and prayed cheap steel would hold. They say, existing conditions deemed sufficient per observational analysis. Something squinted at me from the line items. The certification for the storm night had a stamp that looked tired. The date inside the circle had been printed over a faint original date. Retrofiling happens. It is legal if you disclose certain things. It is also a signal that somebody did not have their laces tied before the race gun popped. On my way out, I stopped by the fire department and asked if I could talk to a marshal about code compliance questions on service decks as a concerned citizen and HVAC contractor who did work on adjacent properties. They wandered me through a hallway of framed photos, chiefs, parades, a dog with a badge, until I reached Captain DiNardo, who had a face like sunrise on a cinder block and eyes like he was always counting exits. "I am not giving advice on an open case," he said before I even sat. "I'm not asking for that," I said. "I want to understand lockout tagout for storm prep on elevated platforms. Who signs those logs? How logs go missing?" He looked at my hands like he was checking for grease under the nails, because grease is truth. You lose somebody. I can smell that on a man. "My boy," I said. I hated how the words came out, like I had rehearsed them and still failed the audition. "He worked down there part-time. I have this note from him, and I do not know where it lands." "Then make noise," he said, and the caution in his voice hardened into something like respect. "Make it clean. No heroics. Noise is good. Just make it the kind that stands up under hallway light, the kind you cannot sweep under a memo." On the way back, I stopped at the Mendez place. Dot put coffee in me and gossip. The coffee tasted like it had survived a trench war, but it was hot and free, and that is all coffee needs to be. Walt gave me the unasked for specifics of the scratch marks on Ty's black SUV and how the guardrail on 3B had been loose since Memorial Day, even though everyone and their dog had sent an email about it. Walt talked like a man who kept his receipts in chronological piles, not folders. People like Walt are the circulatory system of a town. You can learn more from them than you can from a spreadsheet if you ask like you care, which I did. Back upstairs, I watched the rest of Storm Deck 1. Near the end, rain thickened. Off camera, someone said a word that could have been Evan's name or could have been a swear. The metal latch sound again. Then nothing but rain. The frame glitched and came back sharper, a darker kind of clear, like the camera realized it might be evidence. That is when I went outside to breathe. The air smelled of tide rot and carnival sugar from the boardwalk machines that never stop spinning, even when the town is half underwater. I turned the corner at the old arcade and saw Mara coming out of Ty's building with an overnight bag and Evan's hoodie in her arms. The hoodie was the one with the faded red stripe down the sleeve, the one he wore even in July because some ghosts are cold. She looked right at me and did not startle. She walked to the curb like a person leaving a hotel late, dignity folded into the side pocket. For a second I thought she might say my name soft and ask if I was eating. Instead, she lifted her chin half an inch and said, "You need to stop this." "What is this?" I said. "Your performance," she said. "It will make you crazy. It will make other people think you are crazy. It will not bring him back." "You know something," I said. She smiled without teeth. "I know you," she said, and slid into a rideshare. The door caught the streetlight and shut with the hush of expensive insulation. I stood there long enough to become part of the sidewalk, long enough for the wind off the water to pick up a paper napkin and stick it to my boot like a final notice. I walked, not toward home, just away from stillness. The thing about grief is it has a homing beacon, and no matter where you go, it finds you and curls up like a wet dog at your feet. I kept walking until the streetlights thinned and the night smelled like creosote and wet pilings. The pier at this hour was only gulls and ghosts. The storm had chewed one of the service ladders halfway off its mounts. Someone had wrapped yellow caution tape around it, the kind that flaps in the wind like a nervous confession. I crouched, touched the bracket. I thought of Evan, 16, quiet until he wasn't. Collected old radios from yard sales, said he liked hearing the past breathe. He had hands built for small, careful work, not for falling through gaps a grown man wouldn't slip through. He texted me a photo the night before the storm. Deck lights on, rain in soft strands, captioned, "Looks like a ship that forgot the sea." I didn't answer. I was tired. The kind of tired that thinks tomorrow is owed to you. I sat on a loader bucket someone had parked crooked and let the sound of waves through lattice metal write its own sermon. There are towns built on limestone and hope. Ours was built on compromise and salt. You can feel it in the bolts. You can feel it in the people who choose to look down instead of up. The next day, I went back to the annex. I asked to see the incident reports for the June storm, the redacted version they give out when they want you to think they are being transparent. Lydia did not even sigh this time. Progress of a kind. She handed me a packet with half the nouns blacked out like they were curse words. I read anyway. The rhythm of redaction is a language. The longer the block, the bigger the lie. One page mentioned unresolved structural note pending vendor response. No vendor listed. Another page referenced temporary override of sensor alert at 1942 hours. Override by whom? Black bar. Reason? Black bar. Result? No visible hazard at time of override. The kind of sentence written by someone who has never stood on a slick deck in wind that wants your name. I photocopied 3 pages at $1.50 each. The machine coughed, like even it was tired of secrets. I slipped the copies into a manila folder I had labeled with a number instead of a name. Names are emotional. Numbers behave. Outside, I called Samira, a journalist who still believed ink could burn. We met at the bench behind the cannery mural where nobody pretended the fish ever smiled. I handed her the folder, watched her eyes start doing math. They will stonewall, she said. They already are. You have more. I have enough to ask better questions. She nodded. The badge logs will tell you shift density. If the counts drop at the same time the storm warnings rise, someone cleared people without clearance. I need the logs first, I said. You'll get them, and when you do, call me. We go together. 2 sets of eyes. One of us will still be calm when the other is not. That night I could not sleep, so I organized Evan's toolbox. Kids collect tools like they collect ideas, random, incomplete, hopeful. A stubby screwdriver, 3-wire nuts, a level that lied. At the bottom was a tag, the kind you zip tie during lockout procedures. His handwriting, do not energize, It cut off. Maybe the marker died. Maybe he was interrupted. I held that tag like a throat. Morning brought a voicemail from the annex. Your records are ready for pickup. Too fast. 7 to 10 business days shrank into 30 hours. When the timeline gets friendly, it means something else is unfriendly. I picked up the envelope. The swipe log summary was neat. Dates, zones, counts. On June 12th, Deck 3B showed 0 entries after 18 Kai. But the maintenance ticket said a supervisor checked the guardrail at 19:15. Ghost supervisor? Or a door propped open, no swipe, no record, a person who knows how to disappear without leaving. I circled the gap, drove to the pier, walked the boards until I saw the camera dome above a junction box. I wrote down the model. I knew a guy, Raj, who could pull cached frames if the port wasn't locked. He met me in the back of his repair shop, where the smell of solder lived in the curtains. Pulling city cams is 5 years in federal if they care, he said. They won't care until the story runs. He cracked his knuckles. I'll need the MAC address. I gave him the number. He typed like a man assembling a bomb made of pixels. Minutes later, he froze the screen. June 12th, 1914. A figure in a poncho, head down, walking the rail, stopping, bending. Too grainy to ID, but the posture was familiar. Someone who owned the space. Someone who believed rain respected job titles. I left with a still frame. Printed it on cheap paper so nobody would think it was worth stealing. I mailed a copy to the State Safety Board with a note. Anonymous tip, check override logs. Sometimes the only way to make a door open is to slide something under it and walk away. At dusk, I sat on the seawall with a sandwich I didn't taste. Gulls argued overhead like they were on retainer for fate. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging or you'll find water. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Threats are just confessions with manners. I typed back, already wet. No reply. The town moves slow until it doesn't. Word travels under doors, through kitchens, in the hush before a bartender flips the sign to closed. People I barely knew started nodding at me in a way that wasn't greeting so much as dispatch. The kind of nod that means, keep going, but don't say my name. 2 days later, the newspaper ran Samira's teaser, Storm Night Irregularities at South Pier. The photo was the still frame, blurred enough to avoid a lawsuit, sharp enough to raise eyebrows. The article named no names, just systems. Systems bruise slower. By noon, the mayor's office called a press conference. Words like ongoing review and community trust were deployed like sandbags. The real storm was inside the departments, where inboxes caught fire and hard drives learned humility. I watched it all from the edge, not triumphant, just present. Grief doesn't celebrate, it tallies. That evening, Mara showed up at my door. No bag this time, no hoodie, just her, in a coat too thin for the wind. You made noise, she said. You told me to stop. I told you it wouldn't bring him back. I didn't say it wouldn't matter. She stepped inside. The silence between us was a bridge with missing planks, but we crossed anyway. She looked at the toolbox on the table, the lockout tag tied to the handle. He kept that in his backpack, she said. Said it made him feel official. It made him careful, I said. She nodded. Careful wasn't enough. No, I said. But documented carelessness might be. She looked at me then, really looked, like the first clear day after weeks of fog. You won't stop, will you? Not until the screws line up. She almost smiled. Then I'll bring coffee. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere out on the pier, a loose bolt ticked against metal, a tiny persistent metronome counting down the time left for secrets. I listened, steady-handed, the way you do when you're almost at the right panel, almost at the truth, and all that's left is the turn of a screwdriver no one can ignore. There is a showroom PierNorth set up on the block where they want to put glass and chrome over everything that used to make this town interesting. The models happened under clear boxes with little LEDs in them, so donors could see their money become rectangles of light. I went in with a visitor sticker that said, "Hello, my name is Nobody." The sticker's glue was already peeling, like even the adhesive knew I didn't belong. The receptionist wore a blouse that cost as much as a week of groceries. She told me tours ran on the hour. I walked past her with the purposeful air of a man who belongs. Purpose is 9/10 of entry. The other 10th is the kind of face that dares someone to call security. I had that face today, carved from not enough sleep and the kind of anger that sands every edge until you look smooth, but can cut. Ty came off a side corridor smelling like aftershave and construction dust, which is a fair summation of Ty. A man built out of jury-rigged swagger and the kind of luck that doesn't belong to him but keeps arriving anyway. His shoes were the kind made to look scuffed, so the rich can cosplay labor. "Nate," he said like we were fishing buddies, "this is not the place for you." "I thought it was," I said. I held a paper coffee cup that was not mine and set it down on the model of Tower D. The cup tipped. Brown soaked a cardboard city. "Whoops!" He exhaled through his nose like a bull that had to be careful who it trampled in front of. His jaw worked around words he couldn't say with the donors in earshot. "We are grieving," he said. "You are using that grief like a crowbar." "I am an HVAC man," I said. "We use crowbars to fix stupidity." "Walk out," he said. He glanced at the ceiling camera like it could do him a favor, like maybe it could edit me out of the footage the way they plan to edit whole blocks out of the city. The way he said it made my knuckles itch. Instead of throwing anything, I smiled. "You left a pamphlet on storm deck safety on the rack by the door," I said. "Thoughtful of you." He watched me leave like a person watches a spark land in pine straw, too small to stomp out without ruining your shoes, too dangerous to ignore. That night, I found his SUV on the street outside his building. I will not do the step-by-step. Aftermath is legal. Method is not. In the morning, his paint had a new personality, and his tires were ideas more than facts. Under his wiper, I left a pier safety pamphlet with a happy cartoon hard hat and a line circled in red that read, "Report all hazards immediately to prevent injuries." I added a smiley face. I wanted him to know this wasn't rage, it was craft. At noon, I was back at the apartment with Rhea from across the hall and the drives. Rhea is a freelance court reporter who can play back a room with her face if she heard it once. She has the kind of memory that makes people nervous, a rewind button behind her eyes. We ate leftover pizza that tasted like cardboard courage and watched Evan's digital leftovers. Evan had the habit of saving everything, pictures of safety audits, screenshots of shift logs, sometimes whole PDF manuals highlighted like scripture. He died with a hard drive full of evidence and a family full of questions. There was a shift calendar Evan had scanned with handwritten arrows pointing to dates and initials. TR appeared on 3 days with circles around them. In the margins, Evan had written ghost shift, which is when a schedule is altered after the fact to make it look like someone was on when they were not, or off when they were. Paper ghosting, spreadsheet necromancy. "You can fake that," Rhea said, "but you cannot fake who remembers the cupcakes in the break room. If a photo shows someone at a birthday on a day the logs say they were off-site, that is a brick." "We will need bricks," I said. "Enough to build a wall and write liar across it." Rhea licked red sauce from her thumb, eyes on the monitor. "Start with who baked the cupcakes. Someone always posts about that." At 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. A number I did not know. Captain DiNardo. He did not waste words. "The guardrail maintenance ticket on 3B was closed 2 days before your boy went over," he said. "Closed by badge credentials we are going to talk about soon." "Ty," I said. "I did not say that," he said, "and neither did you." He hung up before I could decide if that was a threat, a warning, or just efficient policing. At dusk, I took a walk to get my head down out of the attic. The sky was the color of chrome that hadn't decided whether to shine or rust. Ty must have found the SUV because around 8 he came hunting. I heard his steps before I saw him. His gait had the rhythm of someone who thinks the world is a hallway and everyone else is furniture. I cut through. He followed. Inside it was air that smelled like popcorn from 1997 and the ghosts of teenagers who kissed behind claw machines. The screens were dark, but I could still see the outlines of dragons, plumbers, and spaceships burned into glass like memories too stubborn to fade. Ty moved faster than a man who thinks he is king should. He clipped a stool, cursed, and I stepped up a ladder to the roof access, while his weight built a case against his ankles. I was on the roof running across tar and gravel, then down the rusty ladder to the next block while 2 security guards yelled something about liability. I am not proud of how good that felt. Sometimes survival is a petty satisfaction that you tuck in your pocket and pat like a stolen candy bar. I walked the length of the block before my lungs reminded me I was not a young man, just a stubborn one. The city hummed around me. Traffic, neon, the soft grumble of buildings settling into their foundations like old men into recliners. Somewhere a siren wound up, then unspooled into distance. Life went on, even when it shouldn't. Back home, the hallway light flickered in a way I should fix, seeing as I'm supposed to be a man who understands systems. But sometimes you leave a flicker, because it reminds you the world is not perfect, and neither are you. Rhea's door was cracked. She had the look of someone who has been thinking instead of sleeping. "Cupcakes," she said before I even reached my own door. "Blessed are the frosted," I said. She turned the laptop. A social feed from 6 months ago. Happy birthday to the best shift lead, with a photo of Evan holding a funfetti monstrosity, Ty in the background giving a thumbs up like guilt had frosting too. Date stamp. Same day the shift log claimed Ty was off-site at a supplier meeting. 1 brick, Rhea said. We need a wall. She nodded. Then we keep digging. The night stretched long. We combed through Evan's folders, yellow digital manila stacked with names like safety cam dump and suspicious invoices. Every file a breadcrumb, every breadcrumb a reminder. Evan knew something was wrong long before gravity proved him right. Somewhere between folder 12 and folder 19, I felt the weight of it settle in my chest, guilt, grief, and the sour taste of knowing I should have listened when Evan said people were cutting corners sharp enough to slice. Around 3 a.m., Rhea dozed on the couch, head back, mouth open slightly like a cat mid-yawn. I let her sleep. I scrolled through an email thread labeled Water Incident. Someone had complained about pooling rainwater on the storm deck. Ty had replied, already addressed, thanks. He lied in 9 words. Evan's last reply had no punctuation, just urgency. Not fixed, still slippery, still dangerous. Ty never answered. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling until it was time for coffee. Morning tasted like burnt beans and dirty resolve. I checked the news, nothing about vandalized SUVs. Either Ty was staying quiet or the police had better things to do than investigate artistic tire commentary. Both possibilities pleased me. I headed to the Pier project site, this time in plain view. Construction workers moved like ants with tool belts, each carrying a piece of a future they would never afford to live in. I found one leaning on a stack of plywood, smoking like the cigarette was the only loyal thing left in his life. You work storm decks? I asked. Depends who's asking. He looked at me sideways, smoke curling around suspicion. Evan? Yeah. He was the only one who ever read the manuals. The rest of them just sign the clipboard and pray insurance covers the gaps. Did Ty ever talk about the deck rails? The man snorted. Ty talks, but not about what matters. That was the trouble with Ty. His voice came free, but the truth cost extra. By noon, I was back with Rhea. She had printed photos, sticky noted them like crime scene petals. Look, she said, roster from the fire drill 2 months before Evan died. Ty signed in, but security footage shows him leaving early. Ghost shift before the ghost shift. Pattern, I said. Patterns make juries nod. And reporters drool, she added. We leak this right and someone will force an inquiry. DiNardo first, I said. If he thinks we're running rogue, he'll shut it down. You trust him? I trust that he hates paperwork more than me. We gathered the bricks, cupcake photo, fire drill tape, maintenance ticket, storm deck complaint, a pile of almost proof that needed just one more nail to hold. The nail came at 4:17 p.m., a file labeled DocCam13.mp4. Evan must have pulled it before someone deleted the others. It showed the storm deck at dusk. The guardrail was loose, swaying like a drunk leaning on nothing. A man in a high-vis vest stepped into frame, badge lanyard flapping. He examined the rail, looked around, then took out a tablet, tapped, and walked away. The timestamp put it 1 hour before the ticket was marked, resolved. I froze the frame, zoomed, badge photo blurred, but the initials on the vest were clear. TR. Rhea covered her mouth. There's your nail. No, I said. That's the hammer. We didn't sleep that night, not really. We wrote statements, time-stamped files, mirrored drives, hid copies in cloud accounts with passwords long enough to defeat boredom. I drafted a letter to DiNardo, not accusing, just pushing the rock to the hilltop and waiting for gravity. At dawn, the city yawned. The showroom lights blinked awake like artificial stars. I stood across the street and watched donors shuffle in, their shoes too clean to survive a construction site, their eyes too shiny to see rot. Ty arrived late. Limped a little, maybe because sleeping with new tires costs more than money. He saw me. I lifted a coffee cup in salute. His jaw clenched like a trap about to spring. I didn't run. Not this time. Some days you run across rooftops. Some days you stand still and dare the world to move first. He crossed the street, words loaded behind his teeth. Before he could fire, a squad car slipped to the curb. DiNardo stepped out, nodded to me, then looked at Ty the way a locksmith looks at a broken lock. "Mr. Ralston," he said, "we need to discuss a maintenance ticket you closed." Ty's face emptied. No swagger, no aftershave confidence, just a man realizing the future has sharper edges than the past. I walked away before the cuffs came out. Not my scene. My work was the invisible kind, air that moves, heat that balances, truth that circulates before someone tries to choke it. Halfway down the block, I paused. The city still smelled like ambition and failure mixed in equal parts. But somewhere beneath it, I thought I caught the faintest scent of correction, like the world was adjusting its own thermostat 1 degree back toward bearable. Rhea texted. "You good?" I replied. "Bricks delivered. Wall stands." She sent a thumbs-up emoji, then a cupcake. Justice with sprinkles. I put my phone away and kept walking. Purpose in my pocket. Petty satisfaction beside it, both of them warm as a stolen candy bar. The difference between a feeling and a finding is a paper trail. The next morning I pulled public payroll summaries that the city had to post for contractors, the kind of PDFs no one reads unless they already have a reason. I printed them, highlighted them, spread them across my kitchen table like a gambler's losing hand. I matched them against union bulletin photos the guys posted online because people love to tag days off with pictures of burgers and sunset beers, always with the same proud captions about "earned it" and "crew strong." On a day the badge logs later showed Ty off-site, there he was in the background of a group shot by the pier with his vest and his smile and a foam cup with a little dagger logo on it from the only taco shop that prints that. Nobody notices tiny print on a cup except someone already looking for a crack in the wall. I noticed. I circled his face in red ink like I was grading the world's worst homework. I brought the photos to Walt. He pointed to a bolt in a paper invoice from a maintenance subcontractor I would have missed. "They did that bolt order on the 18th, he said, tapping the page with a fingernail stained by grease and age. "But the ticket says closed on the 14th. They are pre-closing tickets. That way you can tell a donor the safety issue is behind you while you wait for the part to arrive." "Tell a donor," I said, pretending I didn't already know what that meant. "People do worse for a ribbon cutting," he said. He didn't look up. He didn't have to. Those words were a shrug carved into stone. Mara found me in the stairwell after that. She stepped into the space so the light hit her right and said, "You are making this ugly." She always knew her angles, even when the world was tilting under her. I looked at her and thought about how many times she must have practiced that tired look in the mirror. "It is ugly," I said. She looked tired. I did not trust it. "Evan had things," she said. "He had dirt on people, and he liked the feeling of it. He wanted to get paid. You did not know that side of him." I stared. I let the silence sit between us, heavy as wet concrete. "He left me a note that said use this to find out what really happened," I said. "He left $250,000 in a box for me. He left flash drives that do not look like hobbies. You know what I think, Mara. I think you found out after. I think you picked the version of the story that kept donors smiling at you." "I begged him to be careful," she said. "I begged him to stop poking men who have trucks and lawyers." "And you put on his hoodie when you left your lover's place," I said. I do not know why I said that. Maybe because pain makes you say petty things. Maybe because the hoodie is what did me in. It is one thing to lose. It is another to be replaced in your own clothes. The zipper still smelled like the detergent I used to buy in bulk. Later that night, Ty came to the Mendez place and tried to throw weight around. He banged Dot's screen door with his knuckles like it owed him rent. Walt stood up and did not move, which is one of the best acts of bravery I have seen. I came down the steps too fast. Ty squared on me with his chin, that half-cocked angle bullies practice in reflection. I slapped him open-handed like a warning and shoved him back onto the freezer chest hard enough for the motor to kick. I put him there until his eyes widened, then I stepped back and lifted both hands. He waited for me to swing again. I did not. I wanted him to flinch every time he opened his fridge. I wanted him to wonder how close he'd come to losing teeth over a lie he told for a paycheck. That might sound like nothing. It was not. There is a line you cross when you put your hands on a man for the first time and decide you like the result. It is not a line you can uncross. It does something to the rhythm of your thoughts. You walk different. You calculate differently. The world stops being a set of choices and becomes a set of openings. 2 nights later, they tried to trap me in the service tunnels under the pier. I heard them before I saw them, boots on concrete, a cough someone meant to muffle, the echo of impatience. I pulled a breaker box lever and the hallway lights stuttered, turned the world into frames. I moved when the dark slid over. Someone grabbed for me and got the back of my shirt. I spun out of it and pulled a fire alarm on my way by. The sirens bleated their beautiful legal sound. There is nothing like a legitimate alarm if you want cameras and witnesses. Bureaucracy makes a lousy shield until the day it doesn't. I got up the stairs and into the blue night while they cursed at a volume that was not smart for men who pretend to follow rules. Back in the apartment, Rhea knocked and handed me a paperback from Evan's shelf. Inside, wedged at page 141, was a second note in my son's handwriting. Dad, if you get this far, do not trust the timeline. I stared at the sentence until the ink blurred. There are words that hit like bullets, and words that hit like a door you never knew existed swinging open behind you. This was the second kind. Do not trust the timeline. He could have said, watch your back, or they're lying, or I love you, but he didn't. He picked the sentence of a man who already knew dates were the first casualties of corruption. I flipped through the rest of the pages, looking for crumbs, marginalia, something. Nothing. Only that one page, that one clue, like a key meant for a lock I had not yet found. The book itself was about maritime disasters, ships that went down slow enough for men to write letters no one would read until the water had already claimed them. Evan had always liked metaphors that felt like warnings. The apartment felt smaller after that, the air heavier. I sat at the table with the note, the flash drives, the payroll sheets, the photos, and something like a map began to form. Not of streets, but of motives. A donor who wanted ribbon-cutting bragging rights, a contractor who padded timesheets and buried defects under paperwork, a union guy who knew showing up on the wrong day at the wrong pier meant more than a dockside beer, a city council head who smiled too easily when talking about public-private partnership, a son who dug too far and wrote his father a note instead of a goodbye. I could have walked away. That thought flickered across my mind like a moth against a bulb. Sell the drives, return the money, leave the city, pretend my son died clean. Men do that every day. They rewrite grief into something manageable. But every time I imagined walking away, I saw that foam cup logo, that stupid dagger printed in cheap black ink, a tiny symbol that told the truth louder than the people paid to hide it. I started calling people who didn't want to talk to me. City clerks who knew how long it really takes to close a ticket. Night shift janitors who saw who signed in after midnight. A widow who still had her husband's work boots by the door and remembered the day he came home saying they had started swapping dates on the forms. Quiet people, the kind who never imagined their words might matter. When they talked, the story didn't just grow, it sharpened. Every lie they told had a timestamp. Every truth they buried left a crease somewhere, on a shipping manifest, a maintenance log, a security camera that never got wiped because the intern called in sick. I learned the trick of this kind of war. You don't fight the men, you fight the record. You make the ledger your witness. Meanwhile, Mara kept texting, carefully worded invitations to talk off-record, to just clear the air. I didn't answer. There is a kind of silence that is not avoidance, but strategy, and there is another kind that is grief choosing armor. I wasn't sure which one I was wearing, but I kept it on. Walt stayed close, pretending to repair a tractor in the yard when really he was listening for engines that didn't belong. Dot made coffee like it was a prayer. Rhea sat across from me in the living room floor, sorting papers, circling names, building a timeline we agreed not to trust. Maybe that's what family is when the world goes wrong. People who hold the flashlight while you pull nails from the floorboards. And every night, before I closed my eyes, I read that sentence again. Dad, if you get this far, do not trust the timeline. It started to sound less like advice and more like instructions. What if the dates weren't just wrong? What if they were designed? What if the real story wasn't what happened, but when someone wanted us to think it happened? That was the moment the map shifted again. I wasn't chasing a murder or a cover-up or a payout. I was chasing the calendar itself, the weapon no one ever suspects because everyone believes a date is just a fact. But a fact written by a man with a pen is a story, not the truth. Evan knew that. He died for knowing that. And now I was going to make someone else learn it. A timeline is the best liar in the world because it looks like math. I went back through the drives. There was a folder labeled warm-up. Inside were videos of minor scares, a misaligned ladder, a loose cable, a poorly seated guard cap. Each was shot from a distance, with someone calling them out, logging them, documenting Ty telling someone to get it done later because the donor walk was at 2. There was one where Evan had set up a camera and walked into frame to show how bad the deck looked, then pushed it so you could see the sway. He was staging a near miss not to be sensational, but to force a fix. He built a fund for blowing the whistle. That is what the cash was. I knew my son then in a way that stabbed me and also made me stand up taller. He had not been trying to shake down anyone. He was trying to buy time and cover. He knew this would get ugly, and he knew I do not have the wallet for ugly, so he left me his. I stopped being decent in that moment. There is a kind of decency that is just fear wearing aftershave. I sent a tip from a burner to Ty that made it sound like a contractor was going to talk. I wrote it in the voice men like Ty believe, which is to say rich with certainty and poor in punctuation. At 6 p.m., he came for me in his backup truck, the one that looks like a catalog dreams about. He tailgated me halfway out of town. I know the service roads. HVAC men know routes nobody else knows. There is a curve above the quarry everyone calls quarry turn because someone lacked imagination. The guardrail there is ornamental. The wind there is a bored god with a bad attitude. I let him get close. I braked where a sane man would not. He clipped the gravel, panicked, oversteered. The truck spun and kissed the ridge, airbags popping like white flowers. I was out of my car in 2 steps. I yanked the door. He came out wild-eyed, swinging hands that were better at pointing in meetings than at aiming. I put him against the fender for 1 second and let him feel my breath and said, "The next time you talk about my son, you will do it with a microphone in your jacket pocket and a camera in your teeth." I left him a burner with 1 number on speed dial. When he pushed it in a rage, it played a voicemail in Evan's voice that said, "You are on the record. Say the thing you will hate hearing later." Then it beeped. He hung up. He looked down the road like there should be someone to help him for money. There was not. Captain DiNardo texted me the next morning with a line that made my scalp tingle. Emergency inspection ordered on the Carousel Pavilion. Gala is 2 weeks. People with suits are liable to trip on sprinkler lines if they are not checked. I filed another set of records requests. Narrow. Badge swipes by zone and hour, anonymized. Purchase orders for guard bolt replacements with delivery confirmations. Invoices from the subcontractor. The city clerk in charge of complaints put her finger over a line and said, We cannot give you the names of private employees. I do not want names, I said. Just the counts. If there were supposed to be 3 men on that deck from 9 to 11 on the 12th, I want to see if 3 badges passed the reader. She nodded because it is hard to argue with math that does not ask for anyone's face. Rhea told a safety blogger who is practically allergic to adjectives that the timeline on the guardrail looked wrong. He posted only dates and closure codes, the quiet kind of post that makes lawyers sweat because there is nothing to sue when it is just a table. Mara tried to float a whisper to a reporter about Evan's supposed habits, implying he had been careless with substances. It died when the coroner's tox report, which is just a public thing in our county, was uneventful. Clean is a boring word until you have to say it out loud. I needed to humiliate Ty in a way that was legal enough to survive sunlight. On a Friday night when he had a small investor dinner in his condo, I parked across the street and projected the public guardrail closure stamp onto his exterior wall in a loop with the date circle magnified to the size of a man. It was a public-facing surface, no property damage, no trespass, just information scaled up until it looked like a god. If you want to know what a person is, watch them when they do not control the screen. Later, Mara met me on a walkway that smelled like old popcorn and fresh paint and said, "You do not know what Evan did for you." "Then say it," I said. She did not. She touched the railing like she was practicing a speech she would never give. On one of the drives, there is an audio file from a staff meeting where nothing special is supposed to happen. Evan wears a mic because the first time anything happens in a room like that, you do not know it is history. On the audio, Ty presses. He says the donors arrive at 2 and the deck will be fine and stop wringing your hands like a grandmother. Somebody jokes about suing the weather if it has an opinion. Then there is a voice that quiets the room. It is my wife's. She is not supposed to be in that meeting. Public relations shows up everywhere because spin beats physics if you say it right. Mara says, "We need to keep this quiet until after probate." She says, "I begged Evan to keep the peace." And then she says, with the kind of strain in her voice that makes you want to think it is love, "If this explodes too early, the carrier will do a deep dive on the policy, and there goes everything. There goes everything, meaning the favor she owed to men with trucks and lawyers who needed her to land this pavilion without scandal. There goes everything, meaning I was not her husband anymore so much as a piece on a table she wanted to keep. I put my hands on the chair and did not stand because I would not come back down if I did. Rhea sat on the couch and looked at me like you look at someone who just watched their home burn, except the house was not a building. I built a trap out of things that were not illegal. I scheduled open mic time at the gala as a contractor with community concerns. I queued the records. I set a meeting with a city council aide who does not like to be surprised. I fixed my shirt collar. Ty's crew tried to grab Rhea's bag 2 days before the gala, thinking the USB was in there. It was a decoy. The files sat in my sock drawer under socks I do not wear unless the occasion is court. The refurbished carousel pavilion looked like a postcard that won too many awards. The animals were glossy and the mirrors sharp. There were donors in suits that came in sizes called European and caterers who lined up shrimp like soldiers. Mara stood at the podium with a face that said community and a heart that I could not find anymore. Ty stood near a column pretending his arm did not hurt. I put my hand up when the council chair asked if anyone from the community wanted to speak. I said I was a local HVAC contractor with concerns about fire load and egress. People always let you speak if you say egress and wear boots. I did not raise my voice. I said I wanted to show a few documents for context. Behind me the screens lit with the retro-filed certification for the storm night, then the badge swipe aggregates, then the subcontractor invoices with delivery dates after the ticket closure, then the guardrail closure code stamped 2 days before the parts came, then the audio. Ty's voice telling his guys to keep the donor happy, Mara's voice asking for quiet until probate. You could feel the temperature change like a unit kicked on. Ty launched forward because men like Ty are not made for sitting still when the camera points the wrong way. He shoved a donor with a pension and took a swing at the air where my face had been. I blocked without looking like I knew how. Security moved. He yelled my son's name like he owned it, and that is when I moved him to the side exit and let the door bang him like a punctuation mark. On the right side of the room, an insurance carrier's rep put her glasses down on her nose and looked at the screen with the date circles. She whispered something to the woman next to her that had the shape of civil review. That is not prison. That is slow ruin that does not give you the dramatic close-up, and I prefer it. The PierNorth board members did the math that people with money do when numbers stop behaving and paused the project publicly before their phones even stopped buzzing. Donors took their checkbooks back into their jackets while pretending to check weather apps. A condo association notice for unauthorized exterior lighting violations had already been drafted by Walt and went out the next morning to a man whose wall had been a billboard for the timing of his sins. Ria's blogger posted a simple timeline with the word updated in the header. No adjectives, just dates that now bit hard. Captain DiNardo's team ran a sprinkler stress test as a demonstration for the donors. It misfired because stress tests rarely look like the brochure. Water came down in a sheet, and everyone remembered that old panic is just new water in the same bucket. Ty bolted for the carousel because people do not run toward doors when the world gets wet. They run toward centerpieces. Maybe it felt like power. I went after him. My boots left a trail you could map. He climbed onto the carousel platform like he had something to say to a horse. The mirrors doubled him. The lights strobed from the electrical hit. He spun to face me and took a boxer stance that would not fool most teenagers. "This is your moment," he said, and bared his teeth. "You going to be a man or a mouse?" "I am going to be a memory," I said. I raised my hand. He flinched, which I will keep in a private frame. Then I put my hand down and stepped into him so close he had to smell all the nights I did not sleep, and all the mornings I adjusted thermostats for people who did not say thank you. I spoke where the microphone would catch me, if some god decided there still had to be one more angle shot of this night. "You know what you did," I said. "And now, everyone else does too. Every breakfast you eat will taste like a battery. Every phone that rings is going to make you think it is a process server. Every time you stand in front of glass, you will see me behind you, not because I am there, but because you will never again be alone with yourself." Security took his arms. He looked like a man who had been removed from the center of a map that he thought would always be his. The sprinkler water stopped. The carousel lights snapped all the way back, and the animals shone like a lie that had finally found the truth under it. People turned to stare at me, and for once in this loud place I did not want to laugh or cry or punch anything. I wanted to stand in the exact middle of that circle and feel it stop moving. Mara stood near the podium. She had the face she wears when she's about to make a speech. Except she did not speak. She stared at me, and I stared at her, and the space between us had the shape of a house we used to live in and would never enter again. I walked off the platform, and every step felt like an old cabinet clicking shut finally after a year of sagging on its hinges. I did not raise my hands for anyone to hold. I did not bow. I did not apologize. I put my boots on the floor and left wet prints that would dry and leave salt. Outside the pavilion, the ocean was still doing its job of being endless and uninterested. The air tasted like metal and something done. The crowd behind me was a sound I did not have to translate anymore. The donors murmured about liability, and the board about pause, and the blogger about updates, and Captain DiNardo about reports, and Walt about letters, and Dot about who needed coffee. Somewhere in that blur, Mara said my name once, like it might still have a place for her tongue to fit. I kept walking. I did not go home to an epilogue. I went home to a window fan that still whined and a note from my son that I put back in the lockbox with the cash I had not yet touched, because there would be uses for it that made sense later. I sat at the table and breathed like a man whose lungs were not rented anymore. Out on the pier, a gull screamed like a comedian who knows the joke is finally over. In the distance, a siren made its way toward some other mess that was not mine. I set my phone down screen first and let the room darken the way rooms do when they no longer need to prove anything. Somewhere my wife would be rewriting her life in a mirror and discovering that some drafts do not get to be read aloud. Somewhere Ty would be on a couch he did not pay for, with his hands folded into fists, because they did not know what else to be. I took one more breath that went all the way to the bottom without finding a hook snagged there. Then I switched off the lamp.